Polish President Karol Nawrocki has an exceptionally good relationship with US President Donald Trump. However, not all politicians in Poland are friendly toward Trump and his side in American politics.
I also endorsed him, so I'm very proud of that. I don't endorse too many people, but I endorsed him, and I was very proud of that, the job he's done.
A strong Polish-American alliance is crucial for strengthening security on NATO's eastern flank. As such, it is crucial for the security of the Polish people.
Polish-American relations are very important, very strong. I think that we have so strong relations that we have never had. And it's very important for me. Our relations are based, of course, on the values. Right. And thank you very much for your support, for your endorsement during my very hard campaign. I remember it, and I'm very grateful for your support.
That is why it is embarrassing for Poland that it does not have an ambassador in the United States. Bogdan Klich, the head of the diplomatic mission, was sent to America after the previous ambassador, Marek Magierowski, was recalled without consulting then President Andrzej Duda. There are no ambassadors in these key posts. This lies beyond the competencies of the Polish presidency. We have witnessed scandalous discussions, attempts to force the president to make decisions, but the responsibility lies with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the government. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs is also responsible for the return of 54 ambassadors without a solid justification. But that's not all. Donald Trump sent a letter to Polish President Karol Nawrocki at a crucial moment, after Nawrocki's first visit in the United States since the start of his presidency, whom Trump had supported in the elections. The letter was sent through diplomatic channels. Diplomatic mail is used to transport official correspondence and documents between a country and its diplomatic missions abroad. It is protected by immunity. It cannot be opened or detained by the authorities of the receiving country, which ensures the confidentiality of the information transmitted, in accordance with the 1961 Vienna Convention on Diplomatic Relations. The shipment was received by the embassy managed by Bogdan Klich, and before it was sent to the addressee, the Polish president, it was disclosed to the media. It is a matter of gratitude for the joint talks during the president's visit to the US. It indicates good relations between the presidents. The letter arrived, but it is an absolute scandal that those who rule today and hold positions in embassies are the first to inform the public about the letter. This only shows the government's ill intentions toward the president. And although the Ministry of Foreign Affairs denies there were any leaks, the media were the first to report on the letter. How is this possible? It simply should not be the case that journalists who are friends with Mr. Klich are the first to learn about the fact and content of a letter addressed to the Polish president. And this is why we learn about the letter from the media. We have a compromised embassy manager. Bogdan Klich held on to the letter, a letter from President Trump to President Nawrocki, and declassified it. He read it and passed it on to journalists before the letter even reached Poland. I have no words to describe the level of dishonor and unprofessionalism, and the damage it has done to the Polish state. Intentional actions to debase the office of the Polish president have been noted in the past. Similar actions were observed from 2007 to 2010, when the late Lech Kaczyński was president. The withholding of a letter from President Trump to President Nawrocki at the embassy by the embassy manager is definitely part of a coordinated effort to undermine the prestige of the Polish state. This is just one stone in a mosaic depicting Prime Minister Tusk's government's communicational dysfunction. Even assuming the most optimistic interpretation for Tusk's government, the situation regarding the communication on the case of the destroyed house in Wyryki is a complete scandal. The consequences of this type of informational chaos are the result of the ruling coalition's actions. That is why the case of the letter perfectly shows how such accidental leaks and malicious, most likely deliberate actions are carried out by the government. Action to the detriment of the Polish state, when the country has no shortage of problems that should be dealt with by none other than Donald Tusk's government.
According to the Sobieski Institute, insufficient spending on military equipment manufactured in Poland is a major problem. This may result in further weakening of the Polish arms industry. Polish Minister Kosiniak-Kamysz promised that at least 50% of the defense budget would be directed to the Polish arms industry. But he is doing something completely different. The contracts planned by former Prime Minister Błaszczak are being minimized. There were supposed to be 1,400 Borsuk infantry fighting vehicles purchased, promised, but there are only 111. There was supposed to be production of K2 tanks at the Poznań plant, but there will only be assembly, and only 60 of them at the Gliwice plant. There was supposed to be development of the Polish arms industry, but unfortunately we see that in the minds of today's government, it is to subsidize German and French industry, and they are not meeting the deadlines for contracts that were concluded during the United Right's term in office. Contracts initiated during the Law and Justice government were supposed to be an impetus for the development of the entire economy. After the change of government, most of them were suspended, or at best, delayed.
Bardzo istotne jest, aby
It is very important to effectively expand the Polish defense industry because the war in Ukraine shows that without our own extensive infrastructure and defense industry, we are unable to defend ourselves effectively.
Przemysłu obronnego nie jesteśmy w stanie skutecznie.
This does not interfere with the declarations of the current government. We are building the Eastern Shield and developing our defense and production capabilities, primarily in terms of the Polish armaments group and the ability to produce equipment and ammunition. We have also streamlined procedures, because deregulation means streamlined procedures for the purchase of unmanned systems and infrastructure investments in defense.
Mamy do czynienia z
We are dealing with a gigantic propaganda scam. Poles are being told that this government is implementing some kind of grand modernization project. But when we check this at the level of individual units, at the level of what specific formations are receiving, it turns out that this equipment does not exist.
co konkretne formacje otrzymują.
The continuation of contracts begun during the United Right government, which is being talked about today, has little to do with reality. This is not the first time that the current ruling coalition has misled citizens, including on the issue of defense procurement. We as the Confederation are of course appealing, and one might say, keeping our fingers crossed and hoping that defense spending will be increased. The big problem is that already this year, one of the foundations of Polish defense financing, the Armed Forces Support Fund, is in serious trouble. An absolute novelty introduced by the Homeland Defense Act was the creation of the Armed Forces Support Fund, and it is completely abnormal for this fund to be suddenly subsidized or repaid from the budget of the Polish Ministry of Defense. These were supposed to be additional funds, not ones that burden the defense ministry.
Już w roku 2024,
Already in 2024,
szczególnie jeśli chodzi o
especially when it
Fundusz
comes to the
Wsparcia Sił
Armed
Zbrojnych,
Forces Support Fund, the projected or
nie
anticipated
zrealizowano
purchase ceiling has not been reached. There is a huge difference between planned purchases and actual expenditures. Representatives of the current government are reassuring. As for the implementation of this year's budget, let's wait and see. We will deal with this as the Public Finance Committee next year. It is easy to buy what is available, but we have to buy what we need. So if this money is to be spent just for the sake of spending, it is better to use it to pay off liabilities or for other such financial flows. But no one is taking this money away. The problem is that the funds for the Armed Forces Support Fund have to be generated, and the government is not doing that. This year, the Armed Forces Support Fund's performance is around 16%, and there are no indications that next year will be any better in this respect, especially since in next year's draft budget, the Armed Forces Support Fund is to be repaid from the remaining budgetary resources of the Ministry of National Defense. The draft budget for 2026 itself states that capital expenditures will be lower than planned for the current year. It shows how incompetent the government is. Because it took less than 2 years for Poland, which according to experts was supposed to be the greatest military power in Central Europe and NATO's third largest army, to return to its old financial problems, just as it was during Donald Tusk's first term in office. Yesterday's show in Windsor was just a prelude to the entire ceremony of welcoming the royal guest. U.S. President Donald Trump was the center of attention for both King Charles III himself and over 100 guests invited to the gala banquet. The traditional speeches during the toasts were full of mutual courtesies. Among those seated at the table were the heads of the largest American technology companies. The estimated total value of the companies whose CEOs appeared in Windsor exceeded $10 trillion.
Together we must defend the exceptional heritage that makes us who we are, and we must continue to stand for the values and the people of the English-speaking world, and we do indeed stand for that. On behalf of all Americans, I offer a toast to one of the great friendships, to two great countries, and to His Majesty, King Charles III, a very, very special man, and also a very, very special queen. Thank you very much.
There was no doubt that this dinner was a prelude to very specific talks behind the scenes as well. The British have a particularly important interest in relations with Washington. The king emphasized this explicitly on numerous occasions.
Clean water, clean air. Our countries have the closest defense, security and intelligence relationship ever known. In 2 world wars, we fought together to defeat the forces of tyranny. Today, as tyranny once again threatens Europe, we and our allies stand together in support of Ukraine to deter aggression and secure peace.
The evening banquet was full of symbols, such as the dresses worn by Queen Camilla and First Lady Melania. However, the most important event was today's working meeting between the president and his delegation with the British Prime Minister and government representatives.
So this partnership today is a signal of our determination to win this race together and to ensure it brings real benefits in jobs, in growth, in lower bills, to put more hard-earned cash in people's pockets at the end of each month. That's what we're determined to deliver.
The Americans have agreed to renegotiate customs agreements with the British. As part of the cooperation, London and Washington have signed an agreement for mutual investments worth $300 to $400 billion. Both countries want to challenge China, hence a separate agreement on the development of artificial intelligence and quantum technology, with the participation of the largest technology companies.
We're forever joined, and we are forever friends, and we will always be friends. This enduring connection is why I was thrilled that the United Kingdom was the very first country with which we made a historic trade deal, and a very good trade deal. He's a tough negotiator. I think it was a better deal for you than us, but these are minor details.
As experts point out, it was no coincidence that Trump was welcomed with such honors in the United Kingdom. The British are well aware of the dependence of American influence in Europe. Donald Trump's visit to the British Isles was not so much political or diplomatic in nature, and even less so a courtesy visit. This is not just about boosting President Donald Trump's ego in any way, but above all about business, and on a very large scale. During meetings with both King Charles and the British Prime Minister, the issue of the threat posed by Russia was discussed, which is extremely important to the British, who have been the target of constant threats from the Kremlin in recent years. When asked directly about his attitude towards the peace plan for Ukraine, Trump himself clearly stated who was responsible for the failure of the White House's diplomatic efforts.
The one that I thought would be easiest would be because of my relationship with President Putin, but he's let me down. He's really let me down. It was going to be Russia and Ukraine, but we'll see how that turns out.
It is no coincidence that the British have just announced a £1 billion support package for Ukraine to be financed from frozen Russian assets. The aid is to include ammunition, howitzers, anti-aircraft systems, and support behind the front lines.
Street violence, intimidation, and political assassination, all with a diffuse, horizontal, mafia-esque organizational structure. This is how Antifa operates, particularly aggressively in the United States. But that is over now, thanks to a decision by US President Donald Trump. I am pleased to inform our many USA patriots that I am designating Antifa, a sick, dangerous, radical left disaster, as a major terrorist organization. I will also be strongly recommending that those funding Antifa be thoroughly investigated in accordance with the highest legal standards and practices. Thank you for your attention to this matter. Activists associated with this terrorist organization in the United States have been trying to destabilize America for a long time. For years, they had gone unprosecuted.
To, co zrobił Trump, ma oczyścić Stany Zjednoczone.
What Donald Trump has done is to cleanse the United States of these movements, which are extremely dangerous to the state, to the family, and to patriotism. So I think what Trump has done is very good. Antifa attacks patriotic values, Antifa attacks the family, Antifa attacks everything that is related to the nation, to the traditions of the nation. Now, for example, Antifa is trying to disparage the assassinated conservative activist Charlie Kirk. Antifa activists mock his teachings about the value of family and God, and even celebrate his death and destroy the candles, flowers, and letters placed by students.
Charlie Kirk. Charlie Kirk.
This was an assassination. This was an attack on America. This was an attack on freedom of speech. This was Antifa violence. And the fact that the shooter had Antifa engraved on his bullet. And this is why I keep proving my point. Antifa is evil. Antifa is a work of Satan.
Antifa also destroys spontaneously erected memorials to Charlie Kirk. They are happy that a man who simply exercised his freedom of speech and very precisely debunked all these leftist ideas was shot in front of students. When dealing with terrorist organizations with diffuse, leaderless organizational structures, like Antifa, the basic wisdom is to destroy their funding networks. In this context, the names of George Soros and his son Alex have been mentioned for years. Soros himself and his son make no secret of the fact they finance various entities that then instigate riots both in the United States and in other parts of the world, including Poland, where funding was also provided. I think the United States has the tools to investigate this matter thoroughly, to examine the flow of money, and to determine exactly what the extent of Soros' assistance is. Antifa, which calls itself an anti-fascist organization, has also repeatedly attempted to violate national security in countries like Poland, organizing protests against the construction of a wall on the border with Belarus and calling for the mass admission of Muslim immigrants, which led to clashes with police. These international militias have one goal: destabilization.
Antifa prowadziła ataki.
Antifa carried out attacks on right-wing activists and journalists such as Andy Ngo, who was severely beaten by Antifa, organized protests, and people who organize Antifa on their social media wrote, "The time for passive resistance is over." By supporting Donald Trump, a majority of Americans have clearly indicated they are choosing a different path. This is a return to normality in America, to the rule of law, to people being able to see that the state is functioning, that Trump has begun to take action against the criminal organizations that are doing so much damage in the United States. The days of institutionally sanctioned left-wing violence in America are coming to an end. President Donald Trump has a different vision, one of stability, public law and order, and economic greatness.